House Concurrent Resolution 9 by Speaker Schexnayder. Good morning, members. Chairman, thank you. Thank y'all for doing the work that you do. I want to start off by saying that I think over these past couple of months, dealing with the pandemic and dealing with the problems that we've all had at home, I think each and every one of y'all have done a fantastic job in y'all's districts. And for us who didn't have a lot of hurricane damage or storm damage, I really am honored to have members like y'all that are willing to step up and do what's right to be able to go and help people. I can tell you in 2016 when it happened in my district, many reps came and spent days and days and days on end, not only in my business to help me get things straight, but in homes of other people that they'd never met and outside their own districts helping us. And that's what we do here. We support each other and we fix things to move forward. As you know, all my life I've owned an automotive shop. I've worked on cars and I've fixed things that were broken and I've made them better. I think that's what we do here a lot. My HR today is, it's a piece of legislation. It's a tool that we have in our toolbox to be able to fix things moving forward. Mine pauses it for 30 days, and then it allows us to take a deep breath and see which direction we need to go in. This is the right way to do this. This is what we need to get done and get out of here to make it better. This is what we need for those people that are in North Louisiana and their businesses are struggling. This is what we need to be able to get the Ladays in the chairman's district over there back together. This is something that we need to allow businesses and small business owners to open their doors up and to be able to do the things that they need to do. This isn't punishing anybody. This is a safe, effective way to be able to do what we do as elected officials to get our state moving back forward. With that, I would hope that each one of y'all look at this HCR, and let's move this thing forward to be able to better our state and to make our state a much better place in the process of moving forward and getting things done. And with that, I would ask for your favorable passage on it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as a hurricane victim, I appreciate you. I know there's members from the Southwest Louisiana delegation, Representative Farnham, Representative Carter, and everybody on the west side of the state. Thank you for what you did. Immediately after the storm, you called and said, what can we do? And we didn't know what we could do, but you put a group of a lot of members that sit on this committee together and came over to Southwest Louisiana and served. And I can't thank you enough, and I appreciate that. It's my understanding that this resolution, we're suspending the laws that gives the authority to the governor to declare the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's what this resolution does. It suspends the governor's authority to act on COVID-19. Is that correct? Exactly. Thank you. I have a question by Representative Horton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe this is what our constituents have been waiting for. Immediate relief while we legislate a permanent fix.
Yep.
And when we say suspend, I just received pictures, and I've shown many of my colleagues last night from 5 different 8-year-olds that go to school with my granddaughter who have horrific impetigo breakouts all over their face. Mouth breathers, have horrible sores. I couldn't even sleep with it last night. And will this help them?
It will. It will.
I thank you so much. At an appropriate time, I'd like to move it out favorably.
Thank you, Representative Horton. I'll hold that motion. Representative Farnham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for being here today. You know, the things that were put in place with mandates leading up to this handcuffed our people in the district. And then when the storm came, it was a knockout punch, which without the other part of it, they probably could have survived. But now the hurricane is just that knockout punch. They were already crippled and hopping around on one foot, and now that hurricane has just punched them out. And there's a lot of businesses that could have recovered, but they won't at this point. And I hate to see that for the people of our area, but this is a good instrument to move forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Farnham. Representative Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for being here this morning. I said on yesterday, and I'll say again, I think the governor showed great leadership in managing this pandemic. I still feel that way about it. I believe that we need to certainly acknowledge the reason why we're in the shape that we're in now in this state, which I think is better, is because of many of the decisions that he made and that he put forward, and not working alone, but working with so many other state agencies, working with the White House, working with the many medical professionals and epidemiologists and others who collaborated to make sure that we manage this pandemic. I know that there are some who feel like, we need to open the state back up, but I don't want that lost in this discussion. I think he showed great leadership. I think everyone who's looked at how Louisiana as a state has managed this pandemic has had nothing but positive things to say, and I do not want that lost in this conversation. I will say to you that I'm not taking any kind of action in this committee today. You're the speaker. I think your bill has a right to somewhat move forward, let the body take a look at it, but that's not to say that I don't have concerns and that we might need to have some further discussion as this move forward today and between now and the floor. But certainly want to salute our governor on the work that he has done, the governor's staff on the work that they have done, as well as the many state agencies, people who put in a very tireless effort to make sure that communications were taking place and that we're in a position where we could even be talking about really trying to open the state up. I just hate to think to where we would be if many of those steps had not been taking place. So just for the record, I want to make sure that that conversation is not lost in this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Jenkins.
And just on that, I'm not here today to poke nobody in the eye. I'm here today to exercise our right as an equal branch of government to be able to look at tools that we have at our availability to be able to help move this forward, just like the governor done with his box. He has tools and options to be able to use to maneuver and do things in these pandemics with his executive orders, and we have tools as well. I'm not here to do that. I think we are here to look at the policies and the things that were passed in the past to be able to fix them moving forward. That's what we do every year when we come into session. We look at laws that was passed years ago that doesn't apply now or doesn't apply properly sometimes. We change them. All of us do. We look at those laws and we change them as we move forward. They might have been fit perfect back then, but nowadays with technology and the people that we have in this state, we have to change those policies to fix what we have now. That's what we're doing here today. You're going to hear multiple bills today that's going to give you multiple options on different ways. They're all good options. We just have to narrow it down. That's our job, to be able to narrow it down and get it to fit what we have today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That clears the board, but we do have a couple of people that would like to testify, if you don't mind giving up the table for a second. Miss Susan Raybourne. Ms. Raybourne, if you could just identify yourself for the record. And she has filled out a green card in support.
Good morning. My name is Susan Raybourne. I happen to be an attorney here in the Baton Rouge area, but I also am a direct descendant of a Mayflower passenger. I'm a descendant of an American Revolutionary fighter. And these things have been very, very important to me. most of which has been during this shutdown, what has been done to our churches. I'm also, number one, a Christian, and I have been very grieved over the absolute ignoring of our right to worship freely and our right to meet in whatever size one chooses to meet as a Christian. I'm also the daughter of a pediatrician. My dad was a doctor. He's deceased. My mother taught nursing at the Baton Rouge General. My daughter is fixing to graduate medical school. She was just up at NIH on a year. She was a research scholar up at NIH, came back. So my brain is filled with everything medical that you could possibly think, but I'm not an MD. We honor our leaders as Christians. We honor you. Our scripture tells us that we are to pray for you, that we are to obey those in authority over us, and we have done that willingly. And it has, at first, was every reason for these shutdowns. There was every reason. Nobody knew anything about anything. And they had to come to a point in time where they could manage the constant information coming in. However, we've gone past that. We're way past that. We know a lot about it. I know, for example, that washing hands, which is exactly what my father taught me to do, and which is what I taught my daughter to do. Washing my dad, when he died, I am quite confident that he stood before God and said, there's only one request I have, that something were to happen in the whole entire world where people would stop shaking hands and start washing their hands. And all of a sudden there's billboards everywhere, wash your hands. I'm like, that, it's got to be Dad. Dad talked to God. I taught my daughter the same thing. But she has also taught me that when you go to med school, you take a course in how to be sterile in the operating room. So we are walking around with these masks where my father, the pediatrician, would say that children are going to be so far behind in their language skills because they see the mouth move. That's how they form their words. That's how they learn to talk, is by watching mouths. And then all of a sudden you're in a whole society and nations of people covering up. We're made in the image of God. Our faces are what say if we're perturbed, if we're sad, if we're angry, if we're upset, if we're concerned, a smile, all those things gone. We have children that are now going to be long behind in their ability to understand. Many of us who went to LSU had professors. We couldn't even understand them when we saw their mouth, let alone with a mask on. I'm also a homeschool mom. I homeschooled my daughter until the 10th grade. She went to Episcopal, but I homeschooled. You have people that, as much as I would love to say, nanny, nanny, boo-boo, all these people are now homeschooling, I know the reality of that. And we've had to live through people that truly don't know how to homeschool. They don't know how to make their child sit still for 5 minutes, let alone an hour or 2 hours. They don't know how to make their children get off of their cell phones or their computers or whatever it is they do, let alone think that these same parents would be able to get their kids to actually do work at home. Some people can homeschool, some people can't. I met plenty of them that I didn't think should even be homeschooling. We've had all these things happening, and now it's time to get back. Some of the other things is I spoke yesterday for a bunch of cheerleaders. I was a Golden Girl, I was a Tigress, and I was a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader. So I'm all about the cheerleaders being able to do their thing on the field. But guess what? If you are on a track outside of that is Cowboys, not Saints, by the way. Cowboys. Yeah. If you're a cheerleader out on a track, at a little high school, you're not going to get COVID if you're cheering on that track. But if there's no track, you're going to get COVID. The ridiculousness of everything is just that. It's ridiculous. Your mask, you're not in a sterile environment where you can't put your hands above your waist. You're not in a sterile environment where you took your scrub class on how to scrub. And if you lower your hands below your waist, that nurse will tell you, get out, doctor. Start all over again. You're not in that sterile. What is it? All of these things must end because we are a country. We have the freedom to work. We have the freedom to go to our places of work. We have the freedom to worship and to not be limited in our worship. Worship is not Zoom. You don't go to church over Zoom. Scripture talks about a separation of the wheat from the tares. Well, we've seen the wheat from the tares. The tares are the ones that sit at home and say, isn't this great? I can go to church in my pajamas and I never have to go to church again. The wheat is going to always go. That's why in China there's an underground church where at the point of death they could die. They still meet. That's church. Church is in China. Church is in Russia under the days when they met in an underground church. Church is in Romania where they tried to pretend they had freedom of religion when really they didn't. They were arresting people left and right and disappearing them. And these limitations on our ability to function in a society are horrific. And while we acknowledge that John Bell Edwards is our governor, and we have all tried to give him that honor that's due him, and we have tried to comply, it's time to end this. And what would be even better, a better way to end it, is to sign your petition and end it. And then do some studies on yourself. There's doctors who are one way, there's doctors who are another way. My daughter has said, I don't know what these doctors forgot. They've forgotten what she has learned in medical school as a researcher at NIH, as a researcher at Wake Forest University. Everything that they're saying on this side is not anything that they're teaching you. So somehow what the doctors have been taught is gone out of their head and has in another realm of medicine that nobody's being taught. You have a doctor that's saying, oh, our tests, they're accurate. A positive is almost always accurate. No, that's not true. The expensive tests may be a little bit more accurate, but the rapid tests, just like the strep, they're 30% false positives. So you have a lot of different things going on. And I'm asking you as our leaders to think about our future. And when you look at these bills today, you're not just looking at Governor John Bell Edwards. You're looking at another governor, and another governor. The governor, my church, where I became a Christian, is Grace Community Church out in Los Angeles, where Dr. John MacArthur is the pastor, where they have had it open, 5,000 people. He's been on the news. You may have seen him. And he is defying the governor because, you know what? He is honoring the United States Constitution. It is those that are the governors like Newsom who are dishonoring our Constitution. They are dishonoring it, not us. We have a constitutional right. And I ask that you think about these things whenever you go to vote on these things and whenever you make decisions. We're here. We need to go about our business. Let us decide if we want to go to a football game. Let us decide if we want to go to church. If you're scared, stay home. I'm not discounting that people have died. I'm not discounting that people aren't in fear. If you're in fear, I ask you to go to the Word of God where it says that your days were numbered before the foundation of the earth. You could be in a car wreck. The fear is because so many people have so much all different information, but our nation has dishonored God, number one, and I believe that we are entering into a time of judgment on our nation for the things that we've done. And that fear will only be relieved as our nation starts getting back to the Lord and His Word. And I ask that you think about these things. And most importantly, sign the petition and you'll be done.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Raybourne. Oh, wait. I have a question from Representative Ivey.
Thank you. Just a brief question to see what some of the public's understanding is. So if we sign the petition, what is your expectation of what happens after?
Well, I'm asking if you sign the petition to stop the state of emergency, then that would stop all of the orders that are in place, like mask mandates, any kind of mandate of limitation on sizes. There's a way, I know that for example, the Tiger Band, 50% can go, and only 50% of the Golden Girls. It's insane. Where our state's losing money. If people want to go to the football stadium, let them go to the football stadium. 99.9% of us, CDC, are not going to have ill repercussions to this.
Sure.
99.9%. And it would relieve the limiting of sizes, limiting all these limitations
Right.
on sizes.
Let me be a little more specific. First of all, I agree. We definitely need to open things up tremendously more than what we're doing now. That said, are you aware of the duration of the effect of this petition?
Well, that's a little bit discouraging. That's what. Oh, you mean the petition?
Yes, ma'am.
Or the
The
HB9?
petition.
The petition, I believe, would be to open things up immediately for
Well,
the rest of time.
to clarify, the law provides that the legislature, by a petition signed by a majority of either house, may terminate a state of emergency. It also may include a duration of time in which the governor may not issue an additional public or emergency. In this
I know
case,
HB9 had that limitation of time.
no, I'm talking about the petition. This is current law I'm referring to, which the petitions are brought from. And so there's been a 14-day petition that's been circulated. There's also been a 60-day. Is there because we have to be prescriptive on the termination, is there a period of time that would be acceptable of prohibition in your mind that would take care of all the problems? And I say that because there's an expiration date. And so if we don't statutorily rebalance and really provide the proper checks and balances in the system, then at the end of that period, we're still faced with having to do something else because it is temporary. It is not a permanent thing.
Well, as an attorney, I know that eternity isn't a prescriptive time period, though I would long for it to be.
I would say it is. It's all the way in both directions.
But, they had a doctor that testified, and they were saying now about, if you were infected, it'll be about 90 days before you could be reinfected. Well, if that were the case, you wouldn't have a vaccine because that would mean that the virus mutated,
Sure.
which is another ridiculous thing. But if you want to figure out how long that the governor would be allowed for him to be suspended, I would think that you would have to at least suspend it for maybe an 8-month period, because you want to be able to see those spikes or what happens, or what, if something really horrible happened, or say it was another future disease or something that we don't even know is coming down the pike.
Sure.
But
Let me interrupt real quick. Let's try to get back to House Concurrent Resolution
Okay,
9.
I'll do that. And my point is, I think there's a belief with the public that the petition, it's just the easy fix. It's not a permanent fix. The other thing is, I'm not aware of any mechanism whereby we can revoke the termination should one of those bad things actually happen, whether it be another outbreak of something that's worse. And so I believe this is why we're also dealing with legislation. I think there's a false perception by the public that the petition is a permanent solution. It's not. Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you, Representative Ivey. Representative Horton.
Yes, I would just like to say one brief thing. Thank you first and foremost for being here today.
You're welcome.
Your concerns and your voice echoes my district. A lot of people say, "Dodie, why are you so desperate?" Because they're desperate. And then after seeing the pictures of the children with impetigo all over their faces, I'm even more desperate. And I understand why the petition it's like my speaker says, it's not a magic pill. No, it's not. No, it's not. And my colleagues that have really researched it, and I appreciate Barry Ivey because he has, that there's maybe not a direct line to where it goes after we sign it and what happens then. And the governor more than likely would sue us, and then our attorney general would take that over. But all we want to do is open up and live according to free Americans. And I believe that that's what you so eloquently expressed, and I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
For giving us the opportunity.
Thank you.
And I would ask that whatever you can do, of all the things that you can do, our churches should never be shut down ever again. Our nation was built on that. Never, never. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Raybourne. Mr. Woody Jenkins. Mr. Jenkins has filled out a green card in support and would like to testify. If you could just state for the record your name and who you are.
Mr. Chairman, members, I'm Woody Jenkins, and I had the honor of representing the city of Baton Rouge for 28 years here in this body, and it's a pleasure to see you. I've been out of politics since the year 2000, and this is actually the first time I've come and testified before a committee, and the reason I'm here is because I think it's so important. I want to take you back when I first arrived here in 1972 as a 24-year-old just elected to the House. That year, the governor asked for and the legislature granted a constitutional convention, and we, that 48 years ago, spent a year drafting a new constitution, and much of the focus was on the Declaration of Rights. And of course, a state constitution can expand the rights over and above what's provided in the U.S. Constitution. And we did that in many ways, and it was approved. It was conservatives and liberals supported it. I'm going to fast forward now to 1993, which was Governor Edwin Edwards' fourth and final term in the legislature, and we had a concern about the inability of the governor to deal with emergencies because the governor has no inherent power in the Constitution to take any extraordinary steps. So he needed legislation, and Representative Hunt Downer introduced a bill to do that. And when we looked at it, of course, many of us in 1993 who had served in the Constitutional Convention were still members of the legislature. And so we were, after having lived through a year of debating individual rights, we were very concerned about how that legislation might affect individual rights. So I want to ask you to take a look at this document that we've had passed out and go to House of Representatives official journal from 1993 and look at page 50. And these are the amendments that I drafted and which were adopted on behalf of many members of the House. It said that the petition, which was already in the legislation, it said, if you look at amendment number 2, a petition would be signed by a majority of the surviving members of either house. We wanted to give both the House and the Senate the ability to end an emergency, and the thought was, if we're giving all this power, if the governor does not have support of both houses of the legislature, it ought not to continue. We knew it would be difficult, but that was the idea, to give either house the ability to end that. You know, and when would that happen? It's not going to happen when there's a hurricane or something like that. It's when something extraordinary is going on. We didn't know what might be going on. We had no idea that what's going on now would go on. But if you look further, it says, and this answers, I think, Representative Iby's question, amendment number 3, the petition terminating the state of emergency or disaster may establish a period during which no other declaration of emergency or disaster may be issued. The petition ends the emergency declarations, but the governor could issue a new one the next day. The thought was that if you have a petition ending the emergency, that the governor would get the message. I'm not sure that he would, but that's the theory. The petition ends the emergency declarations, but it says the petition may establish a period during which no other declaration of emergency could be issued, which is what is in the Speaker's concurrent resolution, a specific period, and that conforms with the law. Now it says in amendment number 5, no executive order, proclamation, or regulation shall create or define a crime or fix penalties. You know, when people say, you're going in a store without a mask, you're violating the law. There is no law like that. The governor has no power to pass laws. He can issue his mandates, but what are his parameters? The emergency powers law has enumerated powers of the governor, very specific enumerated powers. Nowhere in those enumerated powers is there any power to close businesses or require masks or limit assemblies. That's not in the enumerated powers of the governor in the Emergency Powers Act. It goes on, and I want to call your attention to Amendment number 11, which is something that we put in at that time, and you can read it more easily if you go to the front page here. And this created RS 29:736D. Nothing in this chapter, and the chapter is the Emergency Assistance and Disaster Act, nothing in this chapter shall be interpreted to diminish the rights guaranteed to all persons under the Declaration of Rights of the Louisiana Constitution or the Bill of Rights of the United States Constitution. And then it says, this chapter shall not violate Article 2, distribution of powers. In other words, the governor can't enact laws. That's what the distribution of powers is. No branch of our government, none of the three, shall take on the powers of any other three. So it makes it clear the governor doesn't have lawmaking authority. Now, you could say this is superfluous language, and in a sense it is, because obviously no act of the legislature can violate the Constitution, and no mandate or edict or order of the governor can violate the Constitution. But the reason we put that RS 29:736D was to remind the courts of what the legislature wanted to do was limit the governor's powers. He can't violate the Constitution. Now, the governor started issuing executive orders, emergency power orders in March. By and large, I will say without any fear or hesitation of being called incorrect, that his orders have systematically violated the Constitution and even are outside the enumerated powers in the act passing the Emergency Powers Act. Now, how has our Constitution been violated? I'll point out a few of them. Article 1, Section 2 of the Declaration of Rights, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property except by due process of law. His orders have violated due process of law because businesses were ordered closed without a court hearing. The business didn't have to do anything wrong. He just made a blanket statement. You find me in the Emergency Powers Act any language at all that allows that. There's only one thing it does, and that's related to alcoholic beverage sales and firearms. There is some language about that, which is why the bars are in a little weaker position. But closing businesses is not in there. Due process has been violated. Article 1, Section 3, right to individual liberty. No person shall be denied equal protection of the laws. That means you can't have one set of standards for Walmart and another set of standards for the church.
Mr. Jenkins, if you could get to the resolution and tell us
This is
why
about
you
the
support the
resolution.
resolution.
This is about why we need to suspend the action of the governor.
Well, you filled out a green card in support of this
I
resolution.
am supporting it.
So tell us why you're supporting it, and we have questions if you're
I
going to
am
start taking
supporting
questions.
it because the orders are violating the Constitution, and they are beyond the enumerated powers of the governor in the Emergency Powers Act. And now I'm telling you how he is violating those. No person shall be deprived of equal protection of the law or discriminated based on religious ideas. So if a church has a church service, as Life Tabernacle has in Central for the past 7 months, there was an attempt to impose rules on them that weren't imposed on all the big box retailers. You can have all this congregation of people coming in with no masks and not social distancing, but at the church they're supposed to close. Violates Article 1, Section 3. Right to property. Every person has the right to own, acquire, control, and protect, dispose of private property. But that has been systematically violated for the last 6.5 months as businesses were required to close. Right to privacy. This is unique to Louisiana. Every person shall be secure in his person, property, communication, and so on against invasions of privacy. What is it when a government official takes it upon himself to think that he can order people to wear a mask? Show me where in any law a governor has that power. There is no power like that. It's an invasion of privacy. Freedom of religion, prohibiting free exercise. We've talked about that. Freedom of assembly. No law shall impair the right of any person to assemble. We haven't had our meetings of our Ronald Reagan Newsmaker Luncheon of the Republican Party in this parish because there hasn't been a restaurant that's been allowed to be open where we could assemble. Even political gatherings shut down. Freedom from discrimination. It says in access to public areas and accommodations, people should be free from discrimination based on physical condition. Physical condition, that means like you have a health problem preventing you from wearing a mask. But people all over this state are being told they have to wear a mask to go into businesses, even though they have a physical condition. And then unenumerated rights. The enumeration in this Constitution of certain rights shall not deny or disparage other rights retained by the citizens. Now here we have a resolution to suspend for a 30-day period the power of the governor to have further emergency orders relative to the COVID, and that's good. However, remember this, if you pass this resolution and you pass it through the House, that's not the end of the story, because if it does not pass the Senate, it's not going to do a thing. The only way you can ensure that this comes to an end is by petition. You have that power. We're waiting. We're waiting to have
Mr. Jenkins,
our rights back.
please try to stay on the resolution.
Well, sir, I think I am. We're waiting to have our rights back.
Are you ready to start taking questions?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Representative Ivey.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins, for showing up. I appreciate the history lesson. I've done some research myself, and of course found out you, of course, drafted the amendments to provide a lower bar for the legislature to be able to terminate an executive declared emergency. So for me, I'm in full understanding you did provide some additional context that I think was helpful. Your solution for checking the broad authority of the executive branch that was given to it by the legislature was to set the bar low so we could overrule the governor. I think that was wise, in the context and where you were. I think what hasn't been contemplated is that this is an all or nothing proposition. That's, I think, the challenge that we find ourselves in. There's no in between. There's no, while I agree that we shouldn't have the occupancies and the restrictions and that there should be freedom and liberty for business owners to choose what they want to do. I've authored legislation to provide for that. But what we're dealing with now, there is no in between. And so while there may be needs, again, I understand in the balance and the weight and the full context, there are still things that may need to be addressed. And in this situation, we're forced with an all or nothing. Now, I've signed the petition. They can file it whenever they want. It is still temporary unless we just kick a date, right? And so I've done that, and I think this is a full court press approach. There's a petition out there. We've got multiple concurrent suspension resolutions. Mine's for a year, and there's others. I also have legislation, like many others, to change the law to where we can actually be more selective on what items in an emergency proclamation by the governor may be extended. And so I know you are very intimately familiar with the law, having written and participated in a lot of it for years. Is there any authority that the legislature has to issue a state of emergency or to be prescriptive or delineate what we would allow or not? Is there anything that I may have missed?
Well, as I understand and appreciate the statute, you have the ability to end emergency orders, and you can do it for a specific period if you desire. You don't have the power to pick and choose within a given order what you can suspend, and there's some legislation that would do that,
right.
And that's probably a good idea. Yeah. But bear in mind, we're dealing with orders which, by and large, violate the Constitution. So I think it's very important to send a very strong message right now.
Sure.
That this needs to end, and let's reevaluate it. There's still some orders, but let's keep them constitutional. There are a lot of things you can do.
Sure.
A lot of things you can do that are constitutional.
And again, I'm sure you've read the emergency proclamations. There's a lot of things in there that are administrative. By volume, I think most of it, the majority would be considered administrative, non-consequential to or interfering with the daily lives of our constituents. However, obviously, the most offensive things in there are the ones that impact the daily lives of our constituents, our students, and our business owners. And so there's no, and I think that we need to fix that problem going forward. And again, this is just one of those options. I know you're in support of it, so thank you.
Thank you, Representative Ivy. Representative Duplessis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Jenkins, I disagree with most of what you said. I know we're here to discuss the speaker's resolution, but one of the things that you pointed out in your comments was that the actions by the executive branch are unconstitutional. Have there been any decisions by a court to suggest such in the state of Louisiana?
Where it stands, there's been
No.
one. Yeah, where
Has a court ruled such?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I know about the decisions regarding Louisiana law. We've had no final determination of anything in Louisiana so far, but I will tell you that as regards
That's it. That's it. I don't really have anything else after that.
the details. No, there's been no determination at this
Right.
point. Yeah.
But so everything outside of that is just your opinion, because no court has ruled that it's unconstitutional.
Right.
Okay,
That's
thank
right.
you.
And even if they rule, that doesn't settle it either, does it? It does, because they change their minds too.
All right. Well, I thought that a court ruling something was constitutional and unconstitutional was the determination,
Their
the
ruling
determining
at that time, yeah.
factor.
But no, there's as far as the people who are fighting it, there's a lot of hope in a lot of these cases that are going on.
Thank
I
you.
could tell you, but if you wanted to know.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. That clears the board. Oh, no, it doesn't. Representative Lacombe.
Mr. Jenkins, I share my colleague's sentiments. Much of what you said, I tend to disagree with. I know he asked you about an unconstitutional ruling, and one of the things that I looked at from early on in this perspective, one of the very first press conferences that our Attorney General Jeff Landry had with John Bell Edwards at the onset of this. Our Attorney General, who's the Chief Legal Officer of the state of Louisiana, stood next to John Bell Edwards and said that the things that he was doing and the proclamations he was making was well within his purview. And so there's a video of it. It's very famous. It's out there. So I take it from his. And then you mentioned the Life Tabernacle Church in Central.
Mm-hmm.
I know that that has been also massively litigated in the 19th JDC.
No, that's not correct.
Well, they hired some attorneys. There's a lot of criminal proceedings surrounding it.
It hasn't been litigated at all in
What?
the 19th JDC.
Well, there was criminal matters. The guy was charged. The pastor was charged with contempt and a whole bunch of different stuff. So that,
He's been arraigned, and there's a hearing on a motion to dismiss.
but it's
that
pending
hasn't
in
been held.
courts, is what I'm.
There's been no
trying to say.
hearings at all in the 19th JDC.
It's a pending matter in the 19th JDC.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
Mhm.
So, and then I also heard some from the other witness previous before you. I just would like to point out, because there's a lot of stuff being said about our rights, and violating Constitution and this and that. The Supreme Court of the United States of America issued a ruling on June 15th, 2020, and that was authored by our Chief Justice, in which they upheld restrictions in the state of California. And those restrictions were restrictions similar in nature to some of the stuff that was done here. And those restrictions placed occupancy restrictions on churches and whatnot. And the actual Chief Justice of the United States of America on the Supreme Court, not us here, not our courts here in the 19th, not our Supreme Court, the actual Supreme Court, Chief Justice Roberts, issued an opinion and said that California was within their rights. Again, on July 24th, the same Supreme Court upheld, again, similar restrictions by the state of Nevada. So, I think that some of the folks kind of start playing fast and loose with our constitutional rights and whatnot. I would say and venture that the Supreme Court of the United States, when they issue a ruling issued by and written by the Chief Justice, when it comes to things like rights, I tend to say that they probably, that's our chief court of the land. So,
Yes, sir. Well, let me respond if I may. You
Sure.
said with respect to the Attorney General, he did stand with the governor for the first week or two, and he since repudiated that. He said that he's gone far beyond. In fact, I have here, and be glad to provide you, the Attorney General's opinion questioning the mask order and many other things, in which he said, the Attorney General, the mask mandate flatly violates due process, separation of powers, the delegation clause, state of public accommodation, anti-discrimination laws, and is unenforceable. He said the governor has no power to make substantive law through an executive order, even in an emergency. He said, I urge all law enforcement, including the fire marshal and other individuals acting under color of law, to exercise extreme caution when responding to calls related to violations of face mask orders. While face coverings may be recommended, the mask mandate cannot be enforced with criminal or financial sanctions. And he said this, I think, very significantly. The Attorney General said, to the extent that the order purports to deputize business owners to interrogate their customers and make on-the-spot compliance enforcement determinations, the business owners may be found to have been acting under color of state law and themselves be subject to civil rights and or private tort liability, spawning a significant amount of costly and distracting litigation for which hard-pressed businesses are neither prepared nor insured. You should call the Attorney General to testify on these bills because he'll tell you about their illegality. Now, as to the California...
I'm familiar with the article that you're reading from, but I'm also familiar with the first press conference he had prior to any politicization of this thing, where he said, and I quote, he is acting with restraint, with consideration to individual liberties and freedoms, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, that's not what he said since then.
Well,
with respect to the California decision by the Supreme Court, and if you'll read that decision, here's what it said. California law, under California...
I have, and I'm just pointing out...
May I respond?
Yes, sir, but
Okay,
before
may I
you get
respond?
into... I could tell you that the actual court upheld on both of those matters. So all I'm sitting here pointing out is that I've read the decisions. I'm not here to try to mince the words. When it comes to the testimony that's at this table, I'm just saying that there's a lot of people that are coming to this table talking about and using fast and loose the words impinging on freedoms and liberties, and I'm just pointing out that the Supreme Court of the United States has said something differently.
That's not true. What the Supreme Court said was it was based on California law. They upheld California law because it was strictly a state law issue. Louisiana law is completely different from California law, and under our emergency powers or law, the governor only has enumerated powers, and he is constrained by 736D, which forbids the governor from violating any provision of the Constitution, which he shouldn't be able to do anyway. But that Supreme Court decision has no application to the facts in Louisiana.
Thank you, Representative Lacombe. Representative Newell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will be brief. I am going to support my speaker's bill because it's of the bigger picture that we're trying to accomplish, and not based upon what we've heard these last few minutes. The governor, the state has an agreement with FEMA, which has allowed the state to get money to help the local governments, which have ultimately helped the residents of this state.
Wait,
But
is this question in
I'm
response to...
making me a quick
No, I'm just... Mr. Jenkins left the table. Or do you have a question?
leave, that's fine, because he's not going to agree with what I have to
That's
say.
what I'm trying to clarify.
And this money has helped our citizens. But what we had to do in order to get that money is the state had to agree to lead, manage, and drive the overall recovery process and coordinate recovery activities and technical support by setting appropriate state policies. Those state policies included asking us to wear a mask so we're not spreading this virus, asking us to social distance, which we haven't been doing, in an effort to not spread the virus. And if we terminate these steps that the governor has put into place, we didn't have to inform FEMA that we have terminated these steps. And then FEMA will decide whether or not they're going to terminate our agreement, which will terminate the monies that's coming in, which has helped this state help its citizens. And we keep talking about what the governor has done outside of his rights. The governor has been well within his rights in declaring steps that we as a state need to take in order to protect one another. We've heard over past years and constantly about the protection of lives and protecting unborn lives. We need to start working on protecting the lives that are already here, the lives that we can see, we can feel, we can touch. If we're going to have a protection of life, it needs to be after that life is birthed. We need to continue
Representative
working
Noel,
on
let's-
protecting these lives. And I just want to say that I'm going to support Speaker Schexnayder whenever the time comes for the vote. And it's not based on the testimony that we've heard today.
And that time is coming.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, why don't you come back and close?
Thank each and every one of y'all. You see why it's so important that we come back here and work on laws and bills and amendments and things that we passed. We see them back in the day, they see them one way and new eyes get shined upon them, and we see them in other ways. I think this resolution does what we needed to do to make the first step forward, to be able to look at what we have to fix. I thank each and every one of y'all, and I'd appreciate y'all's support.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is a motion by Representative Horton to report this House Concurrent Resolution 9 favorable. Is there any objection? Hearing no objection, House Concurrent Resolution 9 will be reported favorable.
Thank you, members.
Thank you.